Greetings, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Conversations with God's Cast. I wanted to preface this episode with a special message to my tribe. This particular episode was shot just before a huge tower moment in my life, and I wanted to thank each and every one of you that supported as well as served as contrast in my journey to self-discovery. You are my divine reflections, and I love you for that. Now sit back, relax, create, and inspire.
The episode is called Trial by Fire, right? But as I
Mm-hmm.
was sitting with it earlier, I started thinking of more like there's more of a theme about death and rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first question that I have on here, when I first sat down, I'm just explaining when I first sat down, right? I was like, okay, this is what I wrote. I said, during these times of death and rebirth, what's your viewpoint on negative experiences that we are facing? And do you have any encouraging words? Right?
Okay.
So that was my first initial question.
Okay. What are my viewpoints on negative experiences?
Yes. Yeah. Because right now there's an energy right now on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
trial, right? Trial by fire period. Right? And it's not
Mm-hmm.
really a test, right? But you will face contrasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you're in it, like when you're actually going in it, it definitely feels like, what am I doing wrong to call this upon me right now?
Right.
This is a negative
Right.
experience and I don't want this. Like, I don't even want to experience this. Why is this
Right.
happening to me?
Mhm.
Why is this happening to me,
I
Sensei?
think the funniest thing is how aligned this season of trial by fire and or death and rebirth is in correlation with the winter months or the colder season, the season when most people or most things in nature are going through the death process. The fall is the introduction of that, and then in the winter, most of the trees have shed all their leaves in the colder parts of the world, and everything is barren and pretty much dead, if you will. In places where it's covered in snow, everything is covered up by snow. Most of the animals have gone into hibernation, so they've stored up all of this fat and
Mm-hmm.
food to know that they need to be hidden away for a while. So there's this thing that they're faced with, or that we're faced with in nature, where everything around us essentially is going through this trial, if you will, where food is short, resources are short, warmth is short. Um, there's a natural thing that happens in the human body in the winter when the weather is cold. We all tend to do exactly what nature tells us to do, which is to kind of go indoors, and that's a direct correlation. As so above, so below. Whatever's happening on the outside should be happening on the inside. So if our entire world in nature is going inward, we are also being forced or pushed to go inward. And it's not that it's happening to you; it is the response of life. It's the seasons of life. Um, and so when you find yourself in the season of the winters of your life, if you will, in the death and rebirth, in the death part of the death and rebirth portion of it, or in the hibernation season, sometimes referred to as the hermit season, it often does feel like tower moments because nothing tries you more than a season of famine. It's easy to be happy and walking in light and in abundant light and be so bright and all this great stuff when there's a sense of abundance, when everything is plentiful. That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And they say you want to test the character of a man, you test him when he has nothing. When he has nothing, that is when you can mostly see, because it is in the season when he has nothing, you'll see what he'll do to gain something.
It's so funny as you just said that, right? Because I just said it wasn't a test, right? Because it's not really
Hmm.
a test, but it's a self
Hmm.
check, right?
Right.
Because we oftentimes have this idea about like what we are gonna do in a certain situation, how I would react, right? Our righteous side of our brain, right? That's just like the one that's want to be the one that's prevailing. We try to think of the
Hmm.
best possibilities that we think we would do, right?
Right.
But until that contrast actually happens and you can feel all the emotions, right? And then be still enough to like make the action that's true to your heart, right? Minus like the emotional attachment of it
Right.
sometimes. You know what I mean? That
Right.
is a
Yeah.
real self check. Like you start realizing, yo, that's really, this is how I would really have, what I really do in this circumstance.
Of course. And I think it's so funny because when we think of the word trial, it's always this kind of, we feel like this negative connotation to the word because that's what we know of the word trial. But one of the main key things that trial really means, it means to test the sustainability of a thing. So, that does equate to where we are because it's going to test the sustainability of who you are, your character at its core, or really, it's going to see how it's going to show you where the things in your life aren't sustainable, the things that no longer serve you. That's what the contrast does. It makes the picture clear. So when you're having, or you've come to a place in life where you've manifested now this contrast in your life, because that is my strongest belief that everything that comes into our life, we've attracted into our life, we've manifested into our life in some form, shape, or fashion. So when the contrast is now present in your life, it's never here. Not a part of it is here to break you. None of it's here for that. It's not here to break you or to cause judgment, because none of this thing is supposed to be this self-loathing sense of judgment where we're now, oh, woe is me, and I'm this horrible person, and I don't
Right,
have this sense of deserving and
right,
worth. And sometimes we
right.
find ourselves there, and that's
Yeah.
okay too, because that's checking the sustainability of the system that we currently hold and believe. And it's when we have those moments that we are feeling like that and we start saying that stuff to ourselves that we now get to check the sustainability of what we truly believe about ourselves, about our mission and our purpose here on this planet. So those moments are key, as you said. They're so important because they are that self-evaluating moment. It's the checks and balances that we have, because if I am going to truly live the life that I desire to live and the life that I intended to live before I came here in this time space reality, then there are certain things that I need to do to align with that vision, to bring those things into fruition in this dimension in time. And in order to do that, my most divine self or highest self knows what it is that must be shaped in me or refined in me by fire, or through the trial. And so, because my divine self knows that, it will drive me down a path that leads me to this fire, that leads me through the trial, that leads me into the contrast, or that brings the contrast into play into my life, so that these things of refinement, so that this test of sustainability, and so that this manifestation can actually happen. And so often, we'll kick against that, we'll push back because it's so uncomfortable. It's in that discomfort that we will find our greatest deliverance. But
Mm,
we're not always okay with that. We're not always
right.
okay with the discomfort. We're not. It's like when you go to the doctor for and they have to, or go to a chiropractor. I use it as a much better, because if you've never been to a chiropractor, you can ask anybody who's ever been for the first time, when they went their first time, how nerve wracking it is, because the chiropractor has to tell you several times to just relax, because by nature it's a sense of discomfort that it's about to happen. If you ever popped a knuckle unintentionally, or popped your neck unintentionally, or popped something unintentionally, it's not such a comfortable thing. But the discomfort brings a sense of deliverance or relief on the joint. In that moment of discomfort, the following moment is this sense of relief
Mm-hmm.
out of that discomfort. But we understand that the chiropractor will tell you, yes, you're going to feel a little pressure, but I need you to relax. I need you to kind
Mm-hmm.
of lean into the discomfort. I need you to
They
be
lean
okay with
into
the
this sort of
discomfort.
discomfort. I literally in the
And
car
so,
today. Sorry,
go ahead.
I
No.
literally in the car today driving back. I was thinking to myself, contrast is not really the problem, right? There's things that I don't want to happen. That is
Right.
the problem. You see what I'm saying? So when I say the contrast, it's not that having this experience, right? The experience is
Right.
not the problem. It's just that I don't like how uncomfortable I feel in this experience. And this
Right.
is
The
why I
discomfort.
don't
Yeah.
want this to happen. And not only that, but I had an expectation. That's another thing. Sometimes I have an
Yeah.
expectation, and when that expectation isn't met, that also makes me uncomfortable. You know what
Right.
I mean? It's
And
like contrast is really contrary to what I wanted or what I thought I wanted, or what, you know what I mean? I don't leave room for the universe to fill in. I just kind of just, You know what I mean?
I do, I do. And I'll touch 2 points. I mean, you've already heard me say, and it's kind of like my motto when it comes to contrast, that I genuinely believe that only reason that contrast ever shows up is to make the picture clear. And it's the same analogy that I give with a television. If you sit in front of your television right now and take all the contrast out of the picture, there is no balance in the picture. It's not clear. There's a missing element from the picture. And as you
Mhm.
find perfect balance within the contrast, by adding it to the picture becomes clear. Now, all of a sudden, that thing that was out of focus comes into focus. And this is the same thing with your life and with our lives. Is when the contrast comes, or when we're presented with the contrast, it does bring a certain level of discomfort because it doesn't exist. And that's the funny thing. It is not the contrast that brings the discomfort. It's actually the absence of that contrast that brings the discomfort because the picture isn't clear. By bringing the contrast into play, it brings the picture into clarity. And if we allow ourselves to really observe the picture, the full view that's being given to us by the addition of the contrast, we get to kind of lean into the discomfort. And after that, we find deliverance. But
Mhm.
the issue is, like you said, going into it initially, it's the absence, from my experience, it's the absence of that clarity that brings the discomfort. And we
Mhm.
don't realize that the contrast is actually bringing us out of the discomfort that we're currently experiencing. We just don't seem to understand that because we've leaned so close, so far into the discomfort. I mean, we've come so close with the discomfort and so resistant to that discomfort that when it shows up now, we have to be told to relax, just relax. And
Mhm.
that's where we talk about the expectation, because you stated it, and it's so funny because I can definitely relate back to um, how I had to learn the valuable lesson of understanding what it meant to manage my expectations. um, and it's a beautiful balance to understand, because there is this unique thing at play that you've already scripted for your life, that we've all kind of scripted for our life, of how we would like for things to play out. And then there's the part of us on a divine level that already knows how it needs to play out. And if we are not okay with the balance of the two, finding the equilibrium, being led by our expectation, but being freed by the outcome, we find ourselves in a place of disappointment. And that managing of expectation simply means this is what I would like to happen, but what I desire most is that the best outcome for all involved happens, no matter what that looks like.
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Hmm. That's the part. Because sometimes we also think that it's like it's supposed to look a certain way, right? So sometimes we think that we know better for the other person too, right?
right,
Sometimes that person needs a contrasting moment.
hmm,
Sometimes you are playing contrast in somebody else's life.
of course, yes,
Even with your good intentions, even if you want the best da 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 da. You understand?
yeah. How many times has someone wanted something for you that you didn't want for yourself, but you knew for a fact they wanted what they thought was
What's
best for
best
you,
for me?
and that created some tension, or it brought contrast to
Contrast.
a relationship,
Yes.
and it made things clear for both parties. Oh, this
Right.
is really what he or she wanted, and this is what he or she really meant. And now the
Yeah.
two can find a common place because they have both allowed themselves to get past the level of discomfort so they can actually look at the picture for what it is and then see the clarity of it and then embrace it for what it is and lean into the deliverance. That's exactly what happens every time we get presented with contrast and we are able to look at the picture clearer. We allow ourselves to leave the discomfort into deliverance. It's a simple, it's not simple in concept. I mean, in action, but in concept, fairly simple. And the reason why I
Mm.
say not in action, because as you stated, there are emotions involved. There's all of these different things at
The
play.
human
There are these
experience is
expectations.
involved.
And there's these expectations that we haven't necessarily managed to the point where we're okay
And we
with
have
the
our own
outcome being as
darkness.
best.
We have our own particular darkness that gets it, that we're incorporating in our own
Oh
life, right?
yes,
This is why you can't be
yeah,
too righteous because you have to understand that you have your own demons, you have your own darkness. You're not just a right light being, right? So I can use my demon to serve as contrast for you. It doesn't, there's no wrong or right here. You understand? You're never going to get it right, right? But you can never get it wrong, but you can never get it done. What was the saying you
you
said?
never get it. you'll never get it wrong and you'll never get it done. You'll
Okay.
never get it wrong, you'll never get it done because you can't get it wrong because you're doing what you can do at the best with the information that you have at that time. I remember um, my best friend's mother, when she and I were married at the time, once said something so profound to me. And she said, you know, it is not her belief that people necessarily make bad decisions, but that they make the best decision given the information that they have present at the time.
That's she.
And I think that stuck with me so further in life. And I'm not even sure where she got it from, but I know I learned it from her. So credit to her.
Mm-hmm.
But um, that stuck with me so far because when I kind of adapted and kind of started learning from other teachers and understanding that we'll never get it done, meaning life is an ongoing journey. This isn't something you're going to just get to a point and still be alive and be done. No, you're going to be consistently having a level of evolution until you leave this dimension and go into the non-physical. And even then, there's a constant evolution because energy is never lost nor destroyed. It is merely
Ah.
transferred or transformed. So even beyond that, and then it became okay. So you'll never get it done. And then the part about never getting it wrong is because you'll always be presented with an opportunity to get the desired outcome, no
Mm-hmm.
matter how many times you take the test. Like there is no number of times that you can take this quote unquote test or have this quote unquote experience in a particular situation. You may find yourself, and I'll give a simple analogy. It's like when you go take your driver's license test. Okay, it's okay if you don't pass the first time because you can take it again. And, so that's kind of a level of understanding that, oh, okay, so I don't really get it wrong. I just get an opportunity to learn the right way to do it. And that's essentially what
Mm-hmm.
life is consistently about for us. And it doesn't mean that we don't make what we often refer to as bad decisions. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there are things that we do that definitely don't play adversely against us as we're journeying along in the moment. But in the big scheme and picture of things, all roads lead to destiny. So um, it's that part of knowing that you'll never get it wrong because you're going to be making the decision at that moment, giving the best use of what you know and the available knowledge to you in that moment that you are actually tapping into. And should you find yourself revisiting that test or that trial or that level of contrast or that moment of contrast in your life again, all you've done is taken, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience, as one of
There we
our
go.
favorite
I
readers would
love
say.
that. It's like a cycle.
Um,
It's a cycle.
yeah,
It's a
it's a
cycle.
cycle. And so that is what this is about. And I think we need to kind of lean into that concept. I'm not saying don't take any responsibility for making the necessary actions and holding yourself accountable for your thoughts and being very intentional about your actions. What
Mm.
I am saying is that it allows us to lean into the fact that there is always an opportunity for me to quite get it right because I can't really get it wrong. And
Humbleness. Humbleness.
humble,
You are God,
you
but you
know,
also have to remember you are a man as well. It's
yeah, you're a divine
humbleness.
being having a
The
human
sheep
experience, the
and the
human
lion,
experience.
like we were talking about earlier. Okay,
Yeah, the
there's
lion
something
and the lamb.
the
Go
lion and
ahead.
the lamb. Okay, I want to bring it back because we were talking about, you said something just now, right? Which also triggered the concept of death, which is the question that I literally wrote, my last question, right? But there's one more question I'm going to say after this, but this was the last question that I wrote earlier when I was prepping,
Hmm.
okay? I said, what is your concept about death?
Hmm. Um, Death is a door. I don't see death as an ending, and because I truly believe that energy can never be lost or destroyed. It is merely transferred or transformed. There are several things based in science as it relates to quantum physics, the weight and mass of the universe, for instance. Um, it's the same as it was as an inception to account for every person that's ever been here, that is here now, and that will ever be here. So we've all existed in an ethereal energy in weight and mass in this universe since its inception. So we've been here since the beginning. The Bible even makes reference to it. It says, I knew you even before you were in the womb of your mother. And it talks about how in the beginning, um, we were there. We were with this eternal source and force in the very beginning, from the very beginning of the earth. We've always existed. So having that and always taking that, bringing that with me as I've converted in my life and just kind of started my spiritual journey, I understand that death is merely a door, not an end. So my belief in that is that you may live several cycles in this dimension, and you may not, but you are never com- gone. Your energy is never lost. It is the same reason that whether people believe in ghosts and or spirits or not, it doesn't change the fact that there is this constant connection of knowing. We have this, what we people say, I just had this feeling or something told me, and we'll clock it up as being, oh, just the voices in my head for some people. But for some people who've actually had experiences where they've asked questions and gotten direct answers, we know they come from the other side, if you will. They come from an energy that no longer exists in physical form. And I think anyone who has a spiritual belief system believes to some core that death is not the end. That
Death is not the end. And then you
death is
sneeze
not
three
the end. It's a
times.
door.
It's a door.
It's a door. It is really a door. That is my belief. I believe that that door allows us to enter into a non-physical form where we have access to an infinite amount of energy, where the things that we currently can experience, we no longer can experience and have no need to experience, where there is no time, no distance. The thing that we actually have the ability to tap into now, if we allow ourselves to go to that level of height, is what I believe. So yeah, my concept of death is I don't have a fear of it. I don't think any of us should fear it. It's not real, um, and that energy can be never lost and or destroyed, but merely transferred and transformed.
I agree.
So
I agree with
yeah.
mostly everything you said, except for the part of it not being real. So there is definitely a real aspect of death because you can see dead bodies, right? So there's physical death that you can observe, and this is what in reality, right? So let's not get too further away. I just want conceptual understanding for viewers that are saying, yes, is death
No, when I say death,
real?
when we're talking about death, I'm not talking about. I was speaking of our energy, our soul, spirit, whatever we
Hmm.
call our divine vessel. I'm talking about the body. We know that there's a natural decay in order to things. I mean that's why nature is a definite play in that. But the cycle shows us that nothing is actually ever lost. It just takes a different form. So death in its essence, death would mean that it ends and there is no more use for it. It has no life left in it, and that's not the case because everything that turns into something else is used for another life form.
Okay. So yes, right? So death, right? It is we understand, right? So I was just saying that in reality there is a death. There's an aspect of death. What really is the problem is people's fear of death. That is what is the problem
Hmm.
really. That is where
Right,
the contrast is really coming from because when you are born you already know that you are going to die, right? You know, as long as you are breathing air, life, that death is going to come to you, right? And so you develop this fear because it's the biggest unknown, right? But if you really sit with yourself, you really realize that you already know, you knew it, and you've known it, right? So you just have to literally find that peace within yourself, right? To understand that death is in your mind is not really real because once you start developing and experiencing life a little bit longer, you
right.
start realizing that you've died so many times. You can
You
literally
die
use
every
your
day.
mind in a way to get the perception of death, to
Hmm.
ease your heart for you to no longer be fearful, right? Because fear is the opposite of love, and fear
Right.
also triggers the enemy. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
the enemy, and anyway, it's all in emotions, right? And this is when we're
Yeah.
talking
It's
about
really in the
darkness.
emotion.
Sometimes it's hard. Sorry, 1 second. Right? Sometimes it's hard because you have the darkness, right? And the darkness of death, it comes from this again, this aspect of kind of fear, right? And sometimes me as a Scorpio woman, I do oftentimes get lost in the darkness, right? And that could be tantalizing for me because like I can feel the emotion of sadness to the depths of it, right? But it is also very important not to get lost there because I have the anchor of understanding, hey, these are just emotions,
Right.
You see what I'm saying? You can get lost in that and become depressed. You can get lost in that and get suicidal, right? So the next thing is what I want to say is, or ask you is transmuting darkness. Okay? Is there a level of darkness that you cannot come back from in your divine understanding? Is there a level of darkness that you cannot come back from? And then also, if you can, lead into talking about the transmuting of darkness. What does that look like? What does that even mean?
Is there a level of darkness that I believe that you can go to and never come back from? I think you can choose to not come back from a level of darkness. I think to say that there's a level that you can go to that you can't come back from, that would almost say that you are somehow powerless, that you don't possess the divine power to come back from it. And that would be a hard place to hit, and it may be a possibility, but at this point, I'm gonna just have to say my personal experience with it is that it's a choice. I mean, I've gone to some pretty dark places, and I could have stayed in those very, very dark places and felt very comfortable in them for the season that I dwelt there in the darkness. But while becoming very acquainted with my darkness, while being in such a dark space, I became very acquainted with my darkness, um, and that sense of comfort, if you will, with it allowed me not to have a fear of it. And I think that's so often why we visit the darkness and why the darkness shows into our life and why we're presented with our darkness, because most of us live with a fear of the darkness, and not of a physical darkness, but of our own natural darkness. Because um, I don't think we understand that as much light as you shine, there's an equal level of darkness too. And when people say, "Oh, I could never do that," I could never do that, and plenty of times people like I say they can never kill someone, and I
Hmm.
ask them some questions. I ask them enough questions, and we always get to the point where they say, "Well, yeah, in that situation, I probably could." Exactly. So there's enough darkness in all of us to go to a level that we think we can never go to, because that darkness exists in all of us. It's a universal thing. Don't think that you are somehow above a certain level of darkness. You just haven't reached it yet. You just haven't been pushed that far. You haven't chosen to go that level of deepness, because um, there's darkness in all of us, and it may look different, but darkness is darkness. Like, we like to try to judge it or classify it like, oh, that's a little too dark. That's a little darker. And yeah, we could
Well, I
we could
went
say
from
that, but
zero
when
to
you get
hell
into the
real quick.
night,
Hmm.
right? It's very easy to do that, but as it's always pointed out to us, your shadow is always with you. Your shadow is your reflection in darkness. It never leaves you. Even when the sun has gone down and is no longer shining in the light, you can't see it, but pull some light up and you'll find that your darkness is still there. Your shadow is always present when the light is there. And you have to learn to become comfortable with it and acquainted with it in a way that you don't fear it. By understanding it, by losing the fear of it, is how you transmute the power of it. Because, go ahead.
Go ahead. That was perfect. It's a perfect segue. Like you went from that one to that.
Okay.
Yeah, you can take a breath, but that was
Yeah.
a perfect.
So
Oh,
yeah, it's in that way that we learn to really kind of transmute the darkness. It's that level of acquaintance with it, and just speaking from personal experiences over the years, that darkness is not comfortable, especially if you feared the darkness in you for so long. And most of us don't understand that we fear our own darkness, because we'll suppress the stuff that we're thinking that may not be so light, and the things that we may have, those things that we do or think in our own private time, and we won't really deal with those things, and we'll think, oh, I can't believe I thought that, and we'll kind of just brush past it. It's in those moments that have to ask yourself, why do I think like that? Why do I have those thoughts? Why am I having these feelings that are on the opposite end of the spectrum from what I really want to feel and experience? Why am I having those moments, and why am I acting out in a way that I wouldn't want to act out in and things like that. So when we have those moments, it's being able to sit with those moments and be completely honest with yourself, not in a judgmental way, but in a way of understanding. Like, where did this come from? How did I get here? Why am I so triggered by this particular thing? And you kind of go back and you realize that it comes from something, and you go, wow, that's the root of it. And then you have to dispel that thing. You have to kind of release yourself of the falseness of that belief system. And even if it's something that actually happened, and again, we never take away from the experience. We never deny ourselves the experience or deny ourselves the emotions that we feel in those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But we understand that emotions are merely energy in motion. And we have but one thing, is to allow ourselves to have the experience with those emotions and then allow them to pass through us. And that passing through us is where we learn what they are and what they feel like. And then they remind us, they're a key indicator of where we are on our journey. When I feel these emotions, oh, I remember that feeling. That means I'm in this place. I'm getting close to this place that I don't like to be. I'm going back into the darkness. I'm not even just visiting right now. I'm actually getting ready to take a residence there. And we can feel that based on our emotions. They're telling us where we're headed and where we're going. And that's very important. And then once we allow the emotions to tell us where we are in relation to what it is we truly desire, and in relation to our level of darkness and or light, because that's exactly what the gauge is for there. Oh, when I'm having these quote unquote negative emotions, I'm in my dark space. And when I'm having these light or positive emotions, I'm in my place of light. And so when we have those emotions, and they're necessary, that's the one thing I don't want to ever negate, how important it is for us to have both these negative and quote positive emotions, and have these both light and dark moments. They are necessary. They are the necessary balance of all things. If we don't have a day and a night, then nothing grows.
Mm.
Nothing grows without day and night. The night is necessary. The darkness is necessary. When you take a seed and get it to grow, you have to put it in the soil. It has to be buried into darkness. It literally has to be pushed into darkness, where it will die in darkness because it becomes comfortable in the darkness. It finds nutrients in the darkness. And then that nutrient, that being able to extrapolate and being able to become very comfortable in the dark place, allows it to grow into the light. But it needs both the darkness to start the process and the light to continue the growth of the process. And it's the two in balance that gives us what we have now, life. The tree is only here because it's had many nights and many days. It's gone through many days, much light and much darkness, and equal balance. And equal balance. It has not had more light than it's had night,
That's
more days
right.
than it's had night.
Mm-hmm.
There's an equal balance there, and that's what our life looks like. So we have to remember that. I never want to take away from that when I talk about being able to transmute the power or transmute the energy, because I think people so often think, oh, my whole job is to get where I don't have these negative thoughts and I don't ever have these negative emotions and I never have these moments where I visit the darkness. No, the ultimate goal is to get to the place that when it shows up, you know how to transmute the energy to use it as a divine being to create as opposed to destroy.
That's right.
That is that is why they show up. That is why we learn to transmute the power, because there comes a time when some things need to be destroyed, and that is in the level of darkness or low energy, as we would say. And then there's a time when things, that's what we call death, if you will. There's times when things need to actually die. So there's a level of destruction that happens there,
Very much
deterioration that happens
necessary.
there, very much necessary, because that death will now feed the new life. When a tree falls in the
Mm.
forest, it is the constant breakdown by the bacteria that are feeding off of it. Understand that life is feeding off of this death already. What we would classify as dead and dying, it is giving life. Something is actually feeding off of it. And then it is breaking that down, and that is going back into the soil where it's turning into nutrients for living organisms,
For something new, life to be
for
born.
something
Death is
new.
necessary for
Surface,
life to be
death
born.
is necessary. Dark is necessary for light. Light is necessary. It is a constant cycle that we need to have, and that is how we learn to transmute the power. Is learning to, when the night comes,
I'm going to put a yin and
learning how
yang
to
sign right
allow
here.
ourselves. Yeah, the yin yang got to go there. It is so important because it is in the night that we allow ourselves to become acquainted, or in the darkness that we become acquainted. It is only when we become acquainted with the darkness and comfortable enough in it to allow ourselves to die, that we can actually experience the rebirth of the light in the day. That is how the process must happen. We have to be buried in the darkness where we die, and then allow ourselves to be very acquainted with that level of darkness and comfortable where we have no fear of it. where we embrace it as a necessary part of the process. And as we do so, we allow ourselves to reach beyond the darkness into the light. And the more acquainted we are with the nights in our life, the better we are prepared to live in the day of our lives. How it works, in
Beautiful.
my humble opinion.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That was a perfect answer. I have a lot of clips now. I have a lot of clips. I'm going to stop rolling right now. That was the last question.
Ooh, you made it to the whole video. Well, you might as well like and subscribe. Meet the Mix on all social platforms. Please also follow my guest speaker in this episode, Urban Gypsee.
Yeah, when times get hard, shit get hard, and no one flawed. Self-applied, I'm still a guy, I'm still a guy.